Hello, Irish fans, and welcome to another edition of Dome and Domer. My name's Mike Brammer. Joining me tonight, Mike Coffey from NDNation.com. All right, Coffey, quick, here's a good question for you. Are you part of the ND fan base that thinks we're 4-16 away from being 8-4, or are we third third and 18th stop away from being 10-2? Which camp are you in?
I would put myself in the latter. I think if that Ohio State game had ended just a little bit well, a lot of bit differently, but it wouldn't have taken much to make that difference happen. I think you come out of that game with a win. I don't know, maybe Louisville goes differently. Maybe they're a little more focused against Clemson. I do think, though, however, the root problem remains that the offense has not been what we really wanted it to be. And I know a lot of people are on Jared Parker's case about, him not being up to snuff, but I also think, as some friends of mine have reminded me, it's important to remember that Tom Rees left for Alabama like 3 weeks before spring football started. So it's not like Freeman had a good 8, 9 weeks or whatever to really look around. And yeah, they screwed the Ludwig hire up big time. There's no doubt about that. But when you're going up against it, you got to make the hire and just do the best you can. I
Yeah.
am among those that think that there's going to be a change next year. I don't have anything official to back that up, but I do believe we're going to see a new offensive coordinator next year. And you, I look at it this way: you can either focus on the what could have beens, and yeah, they're there, and I don't blame people for thinking about those things. But there's a lot of me that's focused on looking at the improvements that we made from last year. I mean, up until now, knock on whatever wood this is, Notre Dame has beaten just about all the teams they're supposed to beat. Yeah, I know they lost to Clemson, but Clemson. I mean, I playing down there after that Tyler from Spartanburg thing. I mean, you almost
Yeah.
expected something
Yeah.
like that to happen. Louisville's in the top 10 right now, and Ohio State's Ohio State. So
Right.
if they beat Stanford on Saturday, you can look back through the schedule and say, yeah, they probably could have, should have beaten Clemson, who will be like maybe 8-4 or whatever, and a team full of 4 and 5 star players. So
Yeah.
I can't get too bent out of shape, although I do understand the frustration of people who are angry.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a good thing in terms of what could have been. I mean, this could have been a better season had a couple things gone our way. But look, the reality of the matter is college football. The reason it's so exciting and it's such a great sport is because there's inches that separate you
Mm-hmm.
from your competition. And in the game of Ohio State, I mean, what if we intercept that? What if he squeezes his hands and that ball's intercepted
Mm-hmm.
and the game's over? What if Hartman lifts that screen pass just a little bit higher and
Mm-hmm.
that goes for 20 yards, maybe even a score, who knows?
Yep.
There's just all these little things that come into it.
Yeah. Well,
But you
if you remember back to the Bush Push game, that 2005 game against Southern Cal, Luciano was like 6 inches away from knocking that fourth down pass
yeah, yeah.
down, and then
I mean,
that's
literally
game
just
over.
just
And Charlie Weiss, of all people, might have a national championship.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it's
I mean,
it's crazy.
how weird can things get?
Yeah, and all you hope for is that you're in a position to compete in these games, and I think you can say that. I think Notre Dame, the Louisville game got away from us, but again, I mean, it kind of just all depends on that kind of stuff. Now, things will be different next year with the 12-team playoff. I mean, I think
Oh yeah.
the bar is set that you got to make the playoffs every year. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
think that's unreasonable. A
No,
12-team playoff.
I mean, especially if you look at the schedule next year, just ugh,
Yeah,
that's
man, I'd say it's too bad that we don't have Hartman next year because boy, I'll tell you, that's the way that schedule looks at the moment. Now, who knows who A&M picks up?
mhm.
Hopefully it isn't gonna be Urban Meyer or somebody like that. But but in any event, I think you get by that game and then you're gonna run the table likely to Florida State and
Mhm.
and that's going to be a much different team. That's going to be a totally different team now.
Sure.
So who knows? But I think that and I'm kind of in your camp too, and I even think I don't. I'm 50-50 on whether there's going to be an offensive coordinator change. I mean, that could happen, and I think it would be somewhat expected, but I don't know. You know,
I'm
you just
95-5. I think it's
yeah.
definitely
Well,
happening.
that'll be interesting to see. We'll see it. But I think that, there's just so much placed on the offensive coordinator position that a lot of times is one of the more difficult things to, as fans, to
Mhm.
dissect, because all you can look at is what you see with your eye on game day, and yeah, some things are kind of obvious. You at Clemson, you go 3 and out 3 times in a row at the end of the game. I mean,
Mhm.
I find it hard to believe that we just couldn't come up with something. But
Yeah.
the offensive line was depleted. We were down to our 3rd string center.
Mhm.
I mean, it wasn't like we were, but anyways, my point is that I think those are decisions that Freeman makes, and
Mhm.
it's based on a body of evidence that a lot of it we don't see and don't know
Sure.
because we're not there in prep week. We don't know what's discussed in terms of, hey, here's what we're going to try and do, and then how much does he stick with that, and
Mhm.
how often does he get into the scheme that he had for the game, and that's Freeman's decision to figure out whether or not he feels like that's been there. And I think it's a tough situation for Freeman to be in, mostly because he comes from the defensive side of the ball, and this is where it's going to test him, I think, early on here because there's going to be some big moves that need to be made,
True.
and I think that's going to be a challenge for Freeman as he heads into the offseason here. I mean, they still got a lot left to play for. I mean, let's
True.
not.
Yeah. I think
Um,
though, what from what you just said, being a defensive minded guy, I think that's going to help him attract a quality offensive coordinator. I realize that there may be coaches out there who say, well, I don't want to play for an inexperienced guy and stuff like that. But uh, knowing that Freeman is a defensive mind, he's more likely to give more flexibility, a little bit more leeway on the offensive side of the ball, bring in an experienced guy. You can say, you know what? I'm going to not leave you alone, but I'm not going to be hovering over you, second guessing what you're doing because you're in charge of the side of the ball that I don't have a lot of experience on. So I'm depending
yeah,
on your experience and your abilities to make this whole team look good. And then you're going to look good by extension of that.
yeah, and I do think that in terms of the opportunity at hand, I mean, the cupboard's not bare coming in. I mean, you're going to have some offensive weapons coming in the next 2 years, and so it's not like you're going to have a difficult time trying to figure out, all right, how do I put together a scheme here? Actually, defensively this year, I think we're in the top 10 in almost every category.
if
Um,
if Golden comes back, I think we're definitely going to be in good shape. But you kind of alluded to the $64,000 question. Should Notre Dame go to the portal to get a quarterback next year?
Yeah, well, they're gonna have to get somebody. Now, the
You
question
think?
is that yeah, because I think you gotta go into the spring with 4 quarterbacks.
No, I
If
guess, but
if you go in with 3 and then you lose 1, you're down to 2. And that's almost an untenable situation. So I think you've got to get somebody.
I
The
guess
question is, do you get a number
I
1 or do you get a number 3
well,
or a
I
number
think you get
2?
a number three because I'm as we said, the schedule next year, once you get past the A&M game, is not daunting. I look at that schedule and I think Angeli, Minchie, or Carr, can one of those guys get us to Florida State with at most one loss? And I say yes. And the
Yeah.
advantage there is you are building this guy. If you get a guy like CJ Carr really ready to play, you're going into the year after that with a talented, experienced quarterback, which is what you need. And if that doesn't work out, I mean, everything I've read about Deuce Knight says he's one of those high ceiling, low floor guys. So if you have someone like Angeli or Carr or whatever who's ready to take the reins as a sophomore and give Knight a year to bulk up a little bit and really get his mechanics down, you're set for the next 4 or 5 years at the quarterback position. And
Yeah.
I think bringing in like a Sam Hartman type, like a guy who's expecting to be number one, you're really disrupting that chemistry. And at some point, Notre Dame has to show we don't have to go to the portal to get our quarterback. We're going to recruit someone, we're going to sign someone, we're going to develop someone, and they're going to get it done. And looking at the schedule next year, plus whatever dog crap game they're going to pick up for the 12th game, any of the three quarterbacks we're going to have on the roster next year should be able to navigate to a one, maybe two loss season.
Yeah. Well, and just so, and we all know how apparent it is in terms of freshmen being able to step up and play in their first year. I mean, you just look at Manning in Texas; he hasn't even seen the field, and he's one of the most coveted quarterbacks in the last 20 years.
True, but it does depend on the depth chart, though. And I know CJ Carr is going to be coming in within the next couple weeks, and from what I've read, he is going to participate in bowl practices. I mean, he won't be eligible to play, but at least he's going to be around the team. He's going to be learning the ins and outs. He'll probably get a couple reps to throw to some of these young receivers he's going to have next year. I mean, the earlier they can get him started, the better.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's such a huge jump now in
Oh yeah, no
terms
doubt.
of the sophistication level that I mean, it's to everybody's benefit to have
Mhm.
that year to just kind of learn the system, bulk up, like you said, and just get a sense, just constantly studying the game. And so you're going to have that. So I think, I don't know. We'll find out. I'd be surprised if we don't grab somebody. I mean, I think that would be a bit risky, going into spring, knowing that you might lose somebody. I mean, I think
True.
you almost got to, in the world that we live in today, you almost got to assume somebody's transferring. So,
I
um,
guess, but I would love to see a wide open spring competition to determine the
oh,
true pecking
yeah,
order.
look, I think Marcus Freeman, if he's smart, he's not going to name anybody coming out of spring. I think he's going to say, "Hey, we're going into next year. It's an open competition, and
Um,
it's going to be because otherwise you run the risk of losing somebody because they weren't selected."
True, but
Um,
on the flip side though, I want to be fair to these guys, and I want if
well,
they
if
I
somebody,
think
yeah, I agree. If somebody,
last year they told Hartman whatever Freeman said in the press conferences, they told Freeman he was going to be number one, and he talked to Buckner about that, and that's why Buckner left. Now, if there's a full and open competition in the spring, and Freeman comes out like the press conference after the Blue Gold game and said, okay, uh, Carr's are number one, Angeli's number two, Minchie's number three, or whatever, and then Minchie says, you know what, I'm going, then
yeah,
good on him. I will not wish him any ill whatsoever. These guys owe it to themselves to be in the best position they can be, and stringing guys along to keep them from entering the portal. I realize it's the new reality we're living in, but that's one of the things I really prefer Marcus Freeman not do.
yeah. Well, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how. But I think just with the way the NIL is now,
Mhm.
it doesn't make any sense whatsoever for you to be the third string guy if you have the talent to play somewhere.
True.
And so
Agreed.
there's just a ton of pressure on these kids to go make it happen somewhere else. And so I just think that's the reality of the world that we live in now.
But on the
It's
flip
it,
side, as you said, I mean, there, some these guys are like one bad play away from starting. I mean,
yeah.
look at how many starting quarterbacks got dinged up,
Oh, I
and the
agree.
number of guys who came into
Yeah.
play. It's
I think if you're one or two, you got to stay. In
Mhm.
my mind, it's when you're number three is when you begin to scratch your head and say, "All right, if I can be number one somewhere else, I don't think it makes any sense for you to be number three, moving
True.
forward." I think that's what the kids are presented with, and so
No, I agree.
that's the situation we're in. Um,
So, so,
having said
so
all
so maybe
that,
the optimal thing would be if Notre Dame's going to get a quarterback from the portal, maybe a guy from one of the lower level uh,
yeah,
schools
that's what I
who
think.
would say, you know what, I can get a master's degree from Notre Dame.
Yep,
I can
bingo.
be third or fourth on the depth chart, whatever it is.
Yeah,
It's an opportunity for me to provide depth, not get all worked up whether or not I start because there are so many other optimal things I can do. And God forbid things go horribly wrong. I'm still a capable person to
yeah,
fill in at the position.
yeah. I kind of think that's what's going to happen. I don't. I agree with you. I don't think they're going to go get a number one because I just think that's going to send.
Terrible
It's
message.
also difficult from a cohesive standpoint for the team to have some
Mhm,
guy come in who's not been there like you have for the last 3 years.
mhm.
And I think it's a challenge kind of make that work. Now, we did make it work this year, but I just think that that's always going to be something in the back of everybody's mind. Oh, we got another rent a quarterback this year. That's
Mhm.
just something you don't want to see. And so I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of moves just because it's college football. And this is the world that we live in
Mhm.
now. And so whether it's players or whether it's staff, there's going to be movement. There's just no doubt about it. That's just the way
Mhm.
that it is.
No, I agree.
So that'll be interesting. And not to detract from the fact that we still have a game to play Saturday.
Yes, we
And
do.
we don't want to make assumptions
Although
here,
you
but
wouldn't know it from the television availability,
yeah,
but yes, there is a game
yeah,
Saturday.
I got to say I was a bit disappointed to hear
Ugh,
that we're on the Pac-12 network because
such as
my
it
cable,
is.
I don't get it on my cable,
Yeah,
so
is it
I'm
really a network when you have to go to Fubo to get it? I mean,
yeah.
come on. I
I
mean,
mean, it's
nothing
just
against Fubo, but I mean,
yeah,
that's not a network,
no,
which is why the
and
Pac-12 is falling apart.
yeah, exactly. And so no exposure.
No.
Disappointing. I mean, Florida State, I guess, but now that Travis isn't playing, I mean, man, that makes that game not very watchable.
Yeah, no.
So anyways, it is what it is. I mean, I expect Notre Dame to not screw this up. I actually expect them to play pretty well too. I don't think you're going to see a big, huge letdown.
No, I don't think so
Um,
either. I mean,
and I do,
especially after the upset last year. I mean, these guys are going in knowing what they got to
yeah,
get done, and
yeah, exactly. And so I think we accomplish that. I think we get through, and then I think 9-3. Hey, look, I think too bad Ed's not on because he nailed it. That's what he thought at the beginning of the year.
that's true.
Would have been interesting to see if he's still okay with that, knowing how we got the 9-3, but I would assume so. Um, but we're going to probably face LSU. I mean, all things seem to be heading in that direction. We'll see.
That's the kind of game where you have to look at who's playing and who's sitting out,
Yeah,
and that's that could make for an interesting game. It could make for I I don't know. If we play LSU, I hope they kick their ass because that
yeah.
guy
Well,
down there or whatever. But
I don't think Daniels is going to play. I'd be
no, I don't think so.
shocked.
And I think that makes a huge
Oh,
difference with them because
that's a
he is
night
their
and day,
team.
yeah, night and day difference.
Absolutely.
I think it would have been a real tough ask for us to keep him in check,
Yeah.
and then match them scoring
And
if
I
you
think
play.
there are still a lot of players on Notre Dame's team who wouldn't mind
Yeah,
giving Brian Kelly a good kick in the butt
yeah,
on the way out. So
yeah. That'll be interesting. It's not like that's a dead set game. There's still some other scenarios.
true.
So it kind of looks like it's heading that way though.
Hmm.
They've got a winnable game. They've got A&M. And so they went out. We're both sitting at uh,
Eight and it will be in the
nine and
Reliant
three.
Quest Bowl,
Yeah,
or
we're both
I
going to
think
be
is that
nine
in
and three.
Tampa?
Tampa, yeah. So that
Yeah.
wouldn't be in Tampa.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe we'll see if we can get a plane ticket. I mean, you never have to twist my arm to go to Florida after
Yeah, to watch a
Thanksgiving.
game.
So
That's exactly right. Yeah. So all in all, I mean, if I think if we could somehow come out with a bowl win, boy, I'd be happy as hell. Not at all disappointed in the season.
10-3
Um,
would be. I think 10-3 would be. I mean, no, it wouldn't be disappointing. I mean, there would still be the little what ifs out there
yeah, what
floating
if?
around, but
Yeah, sure.
it's still an improvement over last year. You're setting the stage for an improvement yet again next year.
Yeah,
That's what you
yeah,
want.
exactly. And just especially with some of the injuries we fought. I mean, I keep telling people that losing Mitchell Evans was a major, major
Hmm.
impact in the Clemson game. I mean, you just had nobody to go to that's your go-to guy,
Yeah, because
and just
his
with
having him would make a big difference.
oh,
Yeah,
it would have made a huge difference. And then Jaden Thomas being banged up. I mean, he's
yeah.
just been unfortunately fighting that bug the last 6 weeks. I mean, I don't think he's been 100% since.
Well, the
Um,
good news is that the wide receiver position fills out a lot better next year,
yeah,
and
yeah.
based on recruiting, so much more depth, so much more speed. That's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, yeah, so that's gonna be great to watch, and we're loaded at running back. I mean,
Oh,
I
hell yeah.
assume Estime's gone. I mean, I would assume,
Yeah,
'cause
probably.
I don't see how he improves his stock with another year.
No,
I think
I'd
he's
love to
gonna
see it,
be
but yeah, I don't see how it happens.
yeah, he's a stud, and I think he's a perfect fit for the NFL.
Mhm.
And he's a guy that's probably gonna be for sure on his way. But we're loaded there, so future's bright. I do think with the way the schedule is next year, um, 10-2 would be the lowest bar that we'd
Oh,
have.
I actually 10-2 might be a little disappointing. I mean,
Yeah,
11-1 would be
yeah, I think
great. I think
11-1 would
12-0
be
is doable.
doable. 11-1 would be nice. You just got to get into the playoffs, and I
Yep.
think both of those scenarios obviously get us in.
Mhm.
And so then at that point, you just let's see how it happens.
Sure.
But big changes all around. I mean, obviously Swarbrick and yep, and Jenkins, which hey, I'm no
Bye.
comments. But yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So yeah,
I
it's
have
gonna
heard
be
good things about people of Aqua. Now the lack of, I mean, now granted, he's got experience on the TV side of things. Can he find good coach? I mean, the good news is, if you look at Notre Dame sports overall, you don't see a lot of gaps where, hey, you need to go get a coach for this or this sport or that
yeah,
sport. In the near term, I think everything's solid enough. I did find it interesting, and actually, I wouldn't mind your opinion on this. I found the fact that the NBC renewal is only 5 years to be interesting.
yeah.
I mean,
I
I
do
mean,
too.
I haven't
Uh,
necessarily heard a number from what I've read. If you combine the NBC number and the amount that they get from the ACC for those contracts, it's like around 65 million a year, which is kind of in the ballpark of what you'd
yep,
get from the conferences,
yep.
but only 5 years. I mean, I'm wondering if they know something we don't.
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, I think that speaks volumes that it was 5 years, because I think college football is going to change drastically in the next 3 years.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I just think that we're probably headed towards that super conference that
Mhm.
has been kind of whispered in the background rooms the last 2 years, and that would not surprise me at all. And I just think that college football is going to be turned into kind of like Division 1, 2, and 3,
Mhm.
only a lot more, because the amount of money that's coming into these schools in that upper echelon is just so much different. I mean, it is so
Mhm.
different than these teams that are not in that category, and
Yeah.
it's just such a huge disadvantage. I don't see how it even continues. There's no way to make this work. And so therefore, I do think there's going to be big changes, and I think that just speaks volumes that was only 5 years.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
and honestly, I think that the minute they said that Southern Cal was going to the Big Ten, I think that's where Notre Dame's going to end up,
Yeah.
because now
Yep.
you've got you're not only segregated into the Midwest, you've got teams out on the West Coast, so you can get exposure
Yeah.
there, and they're good teams on the West Coast. So you bring in Notre Dame and one other team from the ACC, like maybe you bring Notre Dame and Florida State into the Big Ten. That's almost
Yeah.
a
Yep.
almost a
Yeah.
done deal, I think.
Yeah. All right. Let's go with predictions. What are you expecting Saturday?
You know what? I realize it's a road game and the offense doesn't look good in road games, but I think all you need was Stanford's one good punch in the mouth, and they're going to say, "Hey, it's time to fold the tent." I say it's going to be 45-10.
Okay. Yeah, I think the same thing. I think just for whatever reason, we just don't seem to execute on the road very well. Um, and I think that's going to probably rear its head a little bit. But
I do
I
want to
think
see a
it's going to
lot of
be,
Angeli in the second half, though.
yeah, well, it'll be interesting. Again, I think it's going to be dictated by where the game's at. But I
Mhm.
agree. I think if we're up 3, 4 scores, you got to get them in. That'll be interesting. But I think it's going to be like 35-17.
Okay,
But I think there might be a late score from Stanford, a garbage touchdown.
sure.
But you would expect us to assert ourselves early and often in that game, and I just don't see after the first quarter Stanford's going to have a tough time trying to stay with us.
Sure.
So let's hope for that. And hey,
Not sure I'll be able to watch it, but yeah, sure, why
yeah, well,
not? We may have to do a show next week just to describe what happened that nobody
yeah,
saw.
exactly. Yeah, well, hopefully this will be the last time this happens to us, but who knows? All right, great. We'll leave it there. You've been listening to Dome and Domer, an online conversation about Notre Dame sports from a fan's perspective. For Mike Coffey, I'm Mike Brammer. Thanks for listening. You got a Mac, obviously.
What the